Hi guys, joyous Monday. Welcome to hashtag No Filters with me, Cheryl and Norris Hopkins. How can you go all day when you're doing something you love and not even really think about food? How can you sometimes scoff yourself silly and still feel like you've not had enough or still want more? And how can I go a week without eating and still be pooing? Welcome to today's hashtag No Filter show number 20, I do believe. Just me, Cheryl Norris Hopkins, with you. Sabina's still doing her thing in the world. And I wanted to explore the magic of food. Do we need to eat? Is it optional? Let's see what comes up with today's exploration. Disclaimer as always, what I'm sharing with you are different perspectives, different possibilities, different ideas that may give you a little bit more freedom and ease. Maybe the world isn't quite the way we think it is. And what if you could see different perspectives that made you feel as if you had more space and more choice? Because isn't food, just turn off my other device, one of those crazy things where we get slightly obsessed and we kind of set our lives up around food so often? We reward ourselves with food. We celebrate around food. We go out and eat. Look at our industries, how they've expanded, whole cafe culture, how huge that is. Even during lockdown, people are still going out to get coffees. It's food, food, food all the way. So let's start talking about this a bit. Guys, if you want to add a comment, if you're here, that's great. It'd be lovely to hear from you. I can't always tell who's watching, so a comment is really useful. Down below the description of whether this is on Facebook or YouTube, you'll see some links there for me and Sabina, and also the link to the YouTube channel. So if you want to share this, please do. And let's get going. Okay, so of course we need to eat, or do we? Do you remember being a kid where you could be out virtually all day running around, using up a lot of energy and not really having very much to eat? In fact, you went home because street lights came on, or your mum called you if you were playing in a neighbour's garden, but it wasn't because you were particularly hungry. And do you also remember how often you wanted to get down from the table to continue playing or doing something you enjoyed, even though you'd had a few bites of food? So you're at the stage in life where you're using a ton of energy, you're growing in your body, you're running around being active, but you don't even really want to eat that much. Thanks for a thumbs up, whoever that was, thanks a lot. What's more, as an adult, where we tend to be more sedentary, sitting at desks, sitting in cars, we tend to eat a ton more. Now, some of us might say, oh yeah, but we've got a bigger body. Yeah, but do you ever really feel satiated? Do you ever find that you just go to the fridge for something, even though you just ate half an hour ago or an hour ago? And Christmas is a classic example, or Easter, any of those celebratory times where we come together. We put a huge amount of food in our stomachs, and then 2 or 3 hours later, somebody's offering us a bit more. Is it even possible to be hungry? Really? And how comes we fall asleep after we eat, or we feel more sluggish, or do we have to rest in general? What is that about? So I'm going to get us to explore some different aspects around food and eating, and whether what we've been told and we've got used to is really what food and eating is about, or if there's some other things going on. Now remember, nothing is necessarily true. Take what you want, throw away what doesn't work for you. My aim is only to give you more insights, to give you a bit more space. And in particular, I think the world's going to get more cray-cray. I think there are going to be some things that are going to be quite fascinating coming up and coming out as there's a push for more restriction. And that can affect so many things, including our supply chain, right, of food. And so if we start to understand what food's about, maybe if those things happen, it will be easier for us to not necessarily rely on food as much, still have it. Because I'm not saying everybody has to give up food by any means. But maybe we eat more and have more of it because of some other parts of what we're doing in our life rather than actually needing it. So let me just read some comments here. So, Samantha, Thank you, darling. She's saying, I love this point of view. Let me see if I can put this on the screen if I can remember how to do that. There we are. Love this point of view. And she helps to share it. But it's hard to share it with others. They have a hard time comprehending that food is optional. Yep. All beautifully conditioned. Have you seen a baby? How often, again, when a baby, and I'm talking baby in arms, again, it's the most phenomenal growth rate in that first year, 2 years even. And how often babies pull away from the mother's breast and or being bottle fed. There are other things in that. How often are we trying to give them food, or once they get onto some kind of solids, how often are they turning away? And we have to try and force them to eat. Interesting, right? Let me see what else are here. Becky saying, I love food and eat for the sake of it. Hello, darling. Yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that. We're going to explore that a little bit more because we get sort of, just think about food right now. Just take a moment, right? Let's just do it. Just think about food that you like. Notice how your body's changed. You might feel more excited, more alert. You might have some juices moving through your salivation. You might have something going in your stomach. We can just think about food and our body actually turns on, it becomes more alive, but we're not actually eating it. So what are we tapping into there? Let's have a look. Yes, so Samantha saying food should just be for the joy of it, not a habit. One of her life goals is to be a breatharian. So many views here. Becky saying it's not a habit. Oh my God, it's just so exciting. It's a series different perspectives. Guys, thanks so much for commenting. Love it. Because this is what it's about. It's about exploring different ideas and choosing what might work for you even more. So Becky's saying it's more about emotions. Yes, so this is a fascinating one, isn't it? So I'm going to share some of my stuff as we go along here because I've explored food all my life in many respects, although I didn't necessarily think about it in the early part of my life. But I again began really actively questioning what food was about 2013, so about 7 years ago. And I never thought food particularly had a hold on me. I had girlfriends who like almost had orgasms over eating, right? They'd be eating something and they'd be like so enjoying the sensualness of it, just enjoying the taste of it. And I'd be like, what are you up to? I didn't get it. For me, food was functional. Now, I was what people would deem pretty healthy. I did a lot of vegetables. I had a little bit of fish. Wasn't that massive amount. Slow down. I wasn't that much into meat, although I've eaten meat, obviously. I didn't really have much of what people call junk. So crisps, nuts, chocolate, ice cream wasn't really my thing. I didn't even really eat dairy particularly until my mid-30s, primarily being cheese. And I discovered that cheese was incredibly addictive, which is another interesting thing. And so when I first noticed a bit of what people might call cellulite at age 42. And I went, I'm not having that. What's that about? And I thought, I feel solid. I look quite muscular. What's going on here? So it was complete vanity, this exploration. And I'd always pretty much worked out. So it wasn't like I sat around not doing much. But I came across the idea of that food, the more dense food is, so the meats, the animal flesh, the grains, rice and pastas, even pulses. The heavier the food was, dairy, being cheese specifically, the more it kind of clogged up our bodies. And I was like, it does make sense. If I have something quite light, what we might call a salad, or it doesn't even matter, but something we know is lighter, I don't have more energy. But I wasn't sure if I really bought into it. I'd kind of bought into the idea that I wasn't that interested in meats. It wasn't a big deal to move to fish. It kind of just naturally happened. I seemed to be moving towards vegetarian, but I wasn't because I had some more ethical viewpoint about it. So I wanted to explore, and I took a few months just to watch and listen to people's different testimonials, their experience around eating raw, which means uncooked, so mostly high amount of fruits, maybe juices, like freshly squeezed juices, and some like light salad stuff, even some heavier vegetables. And I watched and watched and watched more and more people saying what had changed in their bodies. disease, illness, their shape, their energy, how much sleep they needed. Um, and so eventually I decided to just experiment. And I took 6 months of doing what they call 100% raw. So I had tons of fruit, and I mean, I ate more than I'd ever eaten. I'd be eating maybe 2 or 3 punnets of grapes a day. I'd be eating like tons of veg, mostly kind of salad leaves and the kind of juicy salads, things like they call it like almost like veggie food, peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers. But I'd have like a liter of green juice that I was making each day. Sometimes I'd have other sort of, I'd have some pulses which weren't cooked, but I'd soak them. I was eating some fresh nuts, which, by the way, the nuts we get in supermarkets aren't fresh. The stuff that's really fresh, you normally have to order and can only keep it for a couple of weeks in the fridge. That's a whole another exploration. And what I noticed, not only did I notice my body was dumping loads of waste, literally I spent nothing but it seemed like every hour on the toilet, like peeing and pooing several times a day. It was just mad. And I was just like eating more than I'd ever eaten, more varied, but I was dumping more waste. And I was like, well, where's this coming from? It makes no sense. I was muscular, I had definition in my stomach, but like, where is this coming from? I needed tons less sleep. But you know what's really fascinating in terms of like my body? Yes, my body went down in size. I was like a size 10 to 12. I suddenly became a size kind of 8. But what I really noticed was a massive change in my menstrual cycle. I suddenly went from where had got cleaner, it got lighter, but it was still painful. Where I had swollen breasts, that all vanished. Any kind of body odor, that all vanished. I was like doing 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. That's all I seemed to need. I had more flexibility in my body. I was like, what is going on? And then I began eating cooked food again, just to see what would happen. I started to get more swollen in my breasts again when it came to sort of menstruation time. I noticed the body started to smell. I needed more sleep. I started to notice the skin would get more lined. I was getting stiffer. So it was a very definitive difference between general eating and when I had the raw. But what I noticed even more was that actually the emotional addiction to food that I'd never noticed before was coming through. That the desire, it didn't matter what I ate when I was eating cooked food, I wanted more and I wanted more and I wanted more. Now, this is not about eating cooked food or eating raw or having juices only or not eating at all. This is more about starting to question our relationship with food so that you have more ease in choosing and maybe understanding what might be going on for you. And if it doesn't resonate, throw it away. That's totally cool. The reason I do the shows, that Spina and I did do these shows, is that we wanted to give people an opportunity to have some more insights into things they may not be aware of, so they could unhook themselves a little more, so you can have more ease going through the world and not feel that you're necessarily at the effect of the world so much, and maybe not getting pulled around so much by the world. There's another thing I've noticed. So over this last 6, 7 years, I've gone through eating cooked, normal cooked food, mostly fish, vegetables, admittedly, to going totally raw, high fruit with freshly squeezed juices. I've done water fasting. I've gone back onto cooked food. I've cycled between what I will call fasting generically and eating. And what I mean by that is there are different people with different views of fasting. Some rely on the idea of intermittent fasting when they do 17 hours a day of not eating, but they still might drink something and then they eat. What I'm referring to when I mention fasting, actually giving the body a complete rest from digesting. Now, we all do that naturally when we sleep, right? You don't eat and drink whilst you're sleeping. And guess what? If you notice when you wake up, you generally stink. Your tongue is white. Your body's put energy into maybe finishing off some digestion, depending on how late you ate. But it's then put energy into start to repair and regenerate itself. Because if your body didn't repair and regenerate itself, guess what? If you cut yourself and it didn't do that, you'd still have a cut. So the body heals itself. And have you ever noticed, right, that when you feel ill, don't really want to eat, or you want to eat really, really lightly in comparison. With an animal, have you noticed, when they're not eating, they just want to lay down and rest. And we try and get them to eat, but what is it they know? In the wild, animals, when they've injured themselves, they lay down and rest. They don't eat. They may barely even drink. Because when you think about it, when you eat, your body has to put a huge amount of energy into doing something with that. The scientists, and again, scientists don't have all the answers, and there are different points of view, right? I've heard people say between 60 and 90%, 95% of our energy is put into digesting food. Hence, when we eat something, we're like often knocked out when we've eaten a meal. A mouthful of something, no, not necessarily, but when we've eaten a meal. And I can share with you from personal experience, when I'm fasting, and I didn't finish that definition fully, did I? Let me give that to you, what I mean by fasting. So complete digestive rest. So for 12 hours a day, I don't eat or drink anything. Like completely do not make the body do any processing as whatsoever. And bear in mind, guys, I've worked up to this, okay? And there are things I do that support the body whilst I'm doing that. And then for a period of time, I will have liquids. I happen to have a particular protocol that I follow that others have explored and built on over years and decades and hundreds of years, blah, blah, blah. And the particular liquid happens to be a grape juice, and I have it with a bit of lemon and some herbal tinctures and some powder to support the body. And the reason I mention that is a particular protocol which enables the body to clean itself at deeper levels. Because when you give the body complete digestive rest, and the juice I'm referring to, by the way, guys, is pasteurized, so it doesn't actually make the body digest it, it's already pre-digested. It's like cooking food, it breaks down the energy, the structure for you, right? Cooking food breaks down the structure, so it's easier to put into our bodies. It's like if you were trying to eat a raw piece of cabbage, it's really hard work. But if you steam it, boil it, it's much easier, right? To take in and chew down and swallow down. So when I'm on my fasting, I'm taking this period of nothing in whatsoever, or am I? We'll get to that in a minute. And then I have this grape juice mixture with some powders that help the bowels continue moving. And I actually do enemas as well, which might freak you out totally. And trust me, it freaked me out, the idea of enemas. I was like, who would stick a tube up their butt with water to then poo out stuff? Why would you even need that? Well, I'll tell you what's freaky. When I started this level of fasting, which was about 3 to 4 years ago, 2017, and I watched from the sidelines at this level for about 6 months, watching these people that were following this protocol. I'd already done 2 or 3 years of looking at 3 or 4 years actually of looking at what food was, exploring, having light food, having heavier food, having cooked, having raw, having juice only. And I watched and watched and watched. And these guys said, if you're going to go to a deeper level of fasting, as in take your energy out of digesting food, on the basis your body can heal itself, the lighter you go in the food, in the direction of food, the lighter, the more juicy the food is, the more energy your body has to clean itself and heal itself. And it can heal itself. And again, I'll share more of that in a moment. Then if you stop putting lots of food through it, your body will start dumping stuff that's got stored away in its cells. Which sounds maybe a little cray-cray, maybe not for you guys. If you think about it, your body's just made up of cells, and even that's just a model. But your body will start dumping, and if you don't get that out, you'll start to basically poison yourself from the inside out. And of course, most of us are eating a lot, so we hardly get to that level of detox. We have it overnight, and we wake up and we feel like we're hungry. We're like, oh, my stomach's grumbling. Are you hungry? Or maybe your body's actually just cleaning itself. Okay, step back. Remember when you might spend the whole day out having fun, enjoying yourself, or really into something you're doing. You've got a hobby, you're really into it. You don't want to be disturbed. You might take a bite of something or a slug of liquid. You don't spend anywhere near as much time and energy eating as other days when you're at home, a bit bored, you've got nothing really going on. You sit down in front of the TV and all you want to do is eat. Well, if you're going through the whole day using up energy, doing something, but you're hardly eating, maybe your stomach doesn't even rumble. Is that stomach rumbling really about needing food, or could it be that it's about the body cleaning? Let me give you another example where I actually share some more information. And again, don't take this as truth. I'm just sharing my part of my journey, and there are many others who've done their own version, and I'll share more information on some of this as we go through today's hashtag no filters. Thanks everybody for joining me, by the way. Really appreciate it. And obviously, it's great that hopefully this is adding some kind of value to you. Feel free to share the video. There's a YouTube channel. Obviously, I'm doing it on Facebook as well. If you look in the description below the video, you'll see some comments. And at the very bottom, there's a link to a YouTube channel. It's a little bit.ly link that I've created, which is like a shortened version. So you can share that. And obviously, feel free to comment, and then I can actually respond to anything you've got to say. So, okay, there's a whole idea that we need to eat and that our stomach's grumbling means we need to eat. So I'm currently in my cycle of like, well, I'm fasting, well, I'm not having any digestive work, and then I'll take a time out and I'll have some food just for its fun. And I might fast as in no food, with cycles of having liquids throughout the day, but none of that liquid needs to be digested. So the body actually gets a complete rest. Now, I can go a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, which is where the emotional challenge comes in. And we'll talk more about the emotions and food. I don't feel hungry. Now, the first 2 or 3 days after of stopping eating food, so my body can do its deeper cleaning, I might feel more sort of burdening in my stomach. My body's still full of food. I've done this where I've gone, I've obviously had a normal bowel movement, and I'm being graphic here because this is being real, guys. This is how, by sharing what's going on, you might get some new insights. And you might not, you might just get rid of it altogether. You might completely dismiss all of this. I'll have a normal bowel movement, 2 or 3 maybe. After 3 days, I'm still pooing and still stuff coming out. How is that possible? If you empty out your bowels after eating each day or each morning, whatever it is, thinking that you are now emptying, it's time for more food. How can I go 3 days with not eating and still have poo coming out? What is that? How can I go 7 days without eating and not even putting anything else than liquid in me a few hours a day and still have stuff coming out? How is that possible? What is going on? How can I go a month? Actually, I've never gone a month. I've only gone maximum, I think, so far is 17, 21 days. I'm starting to lose track, but I do it on cycles, right? Definitely 17 days. I've gone 17 days with no food, but having liquid, 2 litres of liquid, 2.5 litres of liquid each day. Not water as it happens, and that's another discussion, but some herbal teas and 2 litres of this grape juice with a bit of lemon and some other stuff. And I'm still, and I, in those cases, I've used these additional simple powders that support the body, because what I tell you what happens, and the week I experimented with this, where I didn't take anything other than liquid, I was still having bowel movements, but I was starting to feel a little bit groggy, because basically the body was starting to dump more. And then when I started to put some basic powders together, like charcoal, bentonite clay, and psyllium husk, and I'm not giving you the prescription here, right, guys? Don't take this as the ingredients you need to follow, you need to do this. There are protocols and things in support with this particular process I'm following. But then when I put these powders in, all those headaches go, because we know charcoal, for example, charcoal is used in hospitals. If you ever get poisoning, you overdose, any chemical poisoning, a ton of charcoal gets put into you because charcoal absorbs toxins. Bentonite clay does the same. Psyllium husk is used, can be used in cooking. It's like a natural fiber. So that natural fiber goes through our body or through my body when I have it, and then that helps sweet things along. And the smell, what comes out? I know it sounds like TMI, right? But I'm going to be real with you. Oh my God. It's just like nasty, but nothing's going in. I'm not eating anything. I'm just having juice. This grape juice and these basic powders and some herbal tinctures which support the body as I'm doing stuff. How is it possible for that to go in one end, none of it smells particularly, and for what comes out the other end to be super, super stinky? What is going on? Okay, let's give you some examples, guys, of some really cool stuff that I've witnessed and people's case studies and their experiences. So there's certain words I'm not going to say because let's just say industries get upset about this idea. So there's a disease, illness called C, which a lot of people die from, okay? And there are people that get rid of it completely by going from eating everyday food to, let's say, taking 40 days of eating red grapes or dark berry grapes, purple grapes. There are numerous testimonials and people that have done that. How can that be? How can they, just by eating grapes for 40 days, come clear of the big C? How's that possible? How's it possible that a guy, and again, this is going to sound gross, but I'm going to share it anyway, a guy who happened to be a butcher, so he was handling meat all the time, started to get more and more ill. Didn't matter what he did, he went to mainstream medicine, nothing seemed to work. Obviously, they gave him medication and scans, and nothing was helping. It was just getting worse and worse and worse. So eventually, his wife kind of said to him, "Look, why don't you start looking to clean up? Why don't you?" There's this guy, happened to be called Dr. Robert Morse, who's a naturopathic guy who's well known for helping people clean out disease from their body or the symptoms. And he basically put them on, I think, all fruit, maybe a light salad, because this guy was used to eating meat, right? So it wasn't necessarily comfortable, but the guy within a few days started vomiting buckets full of worms. And that sounds gross, totally gross. Maybe I should put a disclaimer, there's going to be grossness in this one. Buckets full of worms. Now, I haven't seen it personally. This is just one of the case studies that Dr. Robert Morse was sharing, and he's got a YouTube channel, Robert Morse MD, I think it probably is. I spent a lot of time watching stuff on his channel back in the early days to like dig out, see what was true about what was being said. Was it possible really to clean things out of your body, disease and illness, by changing what you ate or didn't eat? Another example was a guy who went beyond the raw food and then went into this level of fasting that I'm talking about, with these periods of completely dry, nothing, and then the juice and the supporting protocol behind that. He was somebody who was a pretty, I think he was a professional skydiver, at least skydived for his country, I believe. And he done a skydive and the chute didn't open, second one partially, I believe, but basically ended up paralyzed. Legs only, paraplegic, I believe. And he'd gone through the journey of exploring, going from eating. He'd heard about this whole raw thing and doing fruits, and that might help. So he started exploring that, started to get a bit more movement. But he kind of hit a plateau where he wasn't getting enough or wasn't recovering the way he wanted. He was having physio and all the conventional things. But he wanted to see what else was possible. And he started to hear that if he gave the body complete rest and digestion and explore this protocol that I happened to be exploring, it was possible that the body might actually heal itself. Now, I don't remember the timeline of how long he did the protocol for, 3 months, 6 months, a year, without going back and looking at the case study. And basically the guy was able to walk. There's people who have been able to get out of their wheelchairs on fruit only, which seems insane, fruit and some herbal tinctures. That seems insane, right? There's another guy, oh my God, I remember all these case studies, all the things I explored when I was researching this, who had been diagnosed with a big C. And he went under experimental surgery where they removed his entire lymph system. Now, your lymph system is meant to basically is what helps carry waste out of the body, but also the immune response of the body. Now, the people have different views about the lymph system. Some say it's actually a completely different thing, it's an energetic system, but we generally agree with mainstream thinking that it's about helping with the waste removal. And if you've got injury to a site, the little lymphocytes come out to repair, they go down through the lymph system, and that all gets dumped in your bowels and your kidneys, all fit to go out of your body. They took out his entire lymph system. This is what's interesting, actually. You know, when people have lymphs removed and tonsils, lymph, how they could still have issues. The lymph system is part of the drainage system for our bodies, is a perspective, right? So if you start taking it out, you think he's got no way of that's going to be a huge issue for elimination. Everybody in his experimental group died. And 5 years later, well, we know 2020, yeah, 5 years later, I believe it is, he's the only one left. Could be coincidence? Statistically, no, don't think so. What did he do different? He went completely off all food, went on this fasting protocol called the Master Fast system. Master Fast system, yeah. Drank juice, even in hospital, because obviously he was pretty weak from all the things they did. He'd had all the chemo and he'd had his lymph system taken out. He'd gone down all the conventional route. He was meant to die, basically. And he was drinking grape juice with some powders and some herbal tincture, occasionally some green juice, which basically means, you know, celery, apple, cucumbers, those kind of things, some herbs. The guy not only lived within, I think, the second year, and he went down to being very skinny because his body kept dumping stuff. Everything that had gone into his body over his lifetime, including any chemicals, started coming out. And everybody said, "You're nuts, you're going to die." And he refused to eat. They kept taking this protocol, following the protocol with this juice, these periods of dry and nothing at all. I haven't seen any pictures of him in the last couple of years, interestingly enough. But when I last saw a picture of him, he had muscle, like little Popeye muscles. And he wasn't eating food. Like we're all taught we have to eat food, to stay strong and to bulk up. How fascinating is this? Another case study, oh my God, I haven't thought about these for years. A guy who was a photographer, using obviously chemicals in his work, which would, you know, the photographic film chemicals to actually take a film and process it to obviously produce pictures. Had a normal diet. I don't know why he got into going towards the raw side and the fruit side, but he did. And he started basically peeing out the chemicals that he used to work with as a photographer. And he hadn't used these chemicals for 15 years. Nuts, right? Where was that in his body? Where was that? So what if food is not what we think it is? Food is amazingly good fun. Sometimes it tastes divine. A lot of time I'd say it doesn't. And what I mean by that, for example, if you ever notice, if you take the time, the next time you go to eat, notice the first mouthful that you take. And really be present with that, as in feel the texture in your tongue, around your teeth, chewing it. Really chew it, chew it, chew it, chew it, chew it, chew it, chew it. Notice the flavors. Notice how quickly you want to shove it down your throat, as in, do you want to just chew and swallow? Notice how challenging it is, maybe just to chew it to a paste, like to a liquid. And how much you have this pull and this drive to like stuff more in. Right? But notice that first mouthful, and then have another one. You might find after 2 or 3, the taste changes. Maybe 3 or 4. Typically, when I experiment with this, I notice after the second mouthful, the taste has changed. I'm like, well, what's going on there? Does my body only really want the first couple of mouthfuls? Because that was the bit that was really yummy, right? Because we eat food because we think we're going to get some kind of sensual pleasure from it, as well as the idea that we think it gives us energy. which maybe it doesn't give us as much as we've been led to believe. And maybe the reason we keep on eating is that actually it's not giving us the kick that we want. Like the body, what happens after that second or third mouthful? Something has changed. Maybe that's the body saying, no, I've had enough. But we think we're going to get that next yumminess, that next high from eating it, that dopamine hit, serotonin release. Because there's lots of things that are added to foods that are brilliant when you think about it. As if I'm a producer of food, I'm not just talking about necessarily fruit and veg, because most people are like, I don't crave fruit and veg massively, which is interesting. But they crave maybe dairy, animal flesh, sauces, pasta, rice, bread, ready meals, obviously the sweet stuff, desserts. I've lost my train of thought. We got to put it in, and it's still not enough. Like I've noticed this. There's times when I eat, like one example, when I've had a period of time not eating at all, let's say 7 days. At the moment, I'm where am I? I'm day 4. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, day 4. I've had 4 days of not eating. So I do this in cycles. And the reason I do it is because I'm really curious about what's possible with my body. Plus, I've seen stuff change in my body and so-called illness and disease, which is like mind-blowing. In many respects, I'm not surprised. But on another level, I'm just amazed by it. So I go through cycles where I do this fasting protocol and then I eat. And the first mouthful I have when I break that fasting protocol after 3 or 4 days, or sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 2 weeks. It's a lifestyle and it's something I'm doing over a period of time. I'm not rushing. I'm not about to drop dead. I don't have any real big issues in my body. So I'm not on a push it, push it. If I was diagnosed with something, and I've had a couple of things, by the way, and I've sort of alluded to that and I'll bring them back in. I would go really deep. But I'm kind of okay, pretty cool. So I'm, doing it on a more gentle pace. But the first mouthful, and let's say I have some fruit, some grapes, even some soup. Let's keep with the grape example because I've done this. Grapes, which are like juicy and don't require much work, right? Squash a grape, it's gone. There's not much effort required there. It's already pretty liquidy. I've put a grape into my mouth after not eating up for 3 or 4 days, and a grape is pretty tiny. So even if you believe in the idea of conventional medicine, and your stomach is, I don't know if you've had to see this, but your stomach is, let's say, about 7 inches long, about 4 or 5 inches high. They say it can hold between 1 to 2 liters of liquid or food. Again, I watched a guy the other day with a Godiva, full stomach, filling out with liquid, and he got to about 600 milliliters, and it looked like the stomach was going to burst. So actually, that's pretty light, right? Pretty small in terms of how much it can actually take. Yeah, I've had a map like a grape, and I've literally bitten into it and felt my energy drop instantly, like I'm knocked out. One grape. How nuts is that? I've spent 3 days not eating, let's say in this example. 4 days not eating, doesn't matter how often, how long. I've been doing my thing, dancing, going out for walks, working, excuse me, whatever, living life, sleeping on 5, 6 hours, whatever. I have a grape and I'm feeling exhausted. That's mad. And that's just a grape. I have soup and I'll feel tired. I've not got into like mainstream food. But once I start eating heavier food, I start to feel this craving. It doesn't matter. It's like, I want more and more and more. I'm not hungry because I've just lived without eating. Like about 2 weeks ago, I did 14 days, 13, 14 days of that fasting cycle. I wasn't hungry. I had no rumblings actually in my stomach, which we think is hunger. I was kind of not really needing much sleep, which is not that uncommon for me. But I was living life. I wasn't like needing to sleep all the time. I have no energy. I was still working out. Like we think we need food to work out. That's interesting. Or that we need lots of food, like we need lots of heavy protein. Even if it's plant based, not animal flesh. It's not about eating plants or eating animals. This is not about that at all. I'm really inviting us to explore the idea of food as a concept. So 13, 14 days of not eating. Um, I decided to have, I was putting some sauce in a jar, some curry sauce, and a bit got on my fingers as I licked it, and I was like, oh, sauce. So that started the desire to eat. Then I had some soup. I think that's all I had that night. And then the next day I had something else, something else, something else. By the third day, I was like just wanting to continually eat. And I let it go. I enjoyed that. I didn't restrict it. I didn't say what I could or couldn't have. But I noticed the need. This like little monster was like, feed me, feed me, feed me. So what's that about? When I've just gone 14 days without eating, having liquids, right? And, doing the enemas and that kind of stuff that supports the body still dumping. And it was still dumping stuff. And it was still really stinky. But I was having no food. Nuts. And I've been on this cycle for 3 or 4 years at this level. Yeah. Um, so what is food about? Now, if you're coming from eating regularly, full time, the idea of food being optional or eating being optional could possibly seem insane. Somebody I know very well who was a meat person, a guy, standard meat, whatever, has to everything, standard food, had a health scare and was in hospital, couldn't really eat much, that 2 or 3 days there. Um, and then when they came out, they were kind of given the option of like, well, you can keep doing what you're doing, and the option was given in terms of I was chatting with them, and I said, well, you can just go much lighter and give your body a chance to try and heal itself a bit more, whilst you wait for the medical intervention if you choose that route. When this person did that, they were amazed. They woke up less groggy, they had less pain in their body. When they tried to go back to having meat, as it happened, they were like, it just actually hurt their stomach and hurt their butt basically. was creating issues and now when they were slow down, Cheryl. When they were doing the number twos, the body started to adapt to the lighter food, and it was much easier on their body. And every time they try and go back to a heavier type of food, they need more sleep, they have more pain. It's like this is a person who had zero interest in changing what they ate, zero interest in the idea of that even believed that food had an impact, particularly. So, guys, let's explore a little bit about the emotional bit around food, right? Because we all know that we're not hungry, and again, we've even explored what the idea of hunger is just by sharing these ideas and some of the stuff I've given you there. But how often do you do this? Like, oh, I've not got anything really going on, and I'm feeling a bit frustrated or just like bored. I'll go to the food. Or one of the things I do, I catch myself doing, it's fascinating. I reward myself with food. So if something's gone really well, I feel like I've, put in a lot of effort for the day, I've achieved some stuff I want to do, whatever. And I'm like, let me celebrate with food. It's almost like the emotions get too high, too much, have too much excitement from the day. And so I actually try and calm my body down, my emotional state, by having food. This is not what normally comes up, is it? We think we eat because we're bored only, but we also eat to reward ourselves. And as children, how often when we're given food, typically something sweet, if we were good, Right? We actually started to get trained, and we got scolded if we didn't finish our food. How many times did you get told off at the table for not finishing something, or told that kids are starving in other parts of the world, and you'd be like, "I'm not hungry. I don't want anything." The parents were like, "You have to eat." I remember when I hadn't long been in the children's home, so I was eight years of age, and with my foster parents, I never remember having been forced to eat anything. I mean, I ate. I don't remember being told I must finish something. So it was quite a shock for me culturally to then go into not only to go into the children's home, but to then have things that I didn't like, let's say, but being made to sit at the table try and finish my plate. And literally everybody else would have left, and I'd be sitting there with a stone cold dinner. And the culprits, particularly here, were Brussels sprouts, really overcooked Brussels sprouts. And I'd be made to stay there until I finished my plate, even though I almost vomited. Like, how, like, interesting, right? That might be extreme, but this is the kind of things we've been conditioned into believing. We must finish our food. It's bad if you don't eat. In fact, we use food to show our love. Let me cook you something. Let me take you out to dinner. Our emotional state is so tied into food. To avoid motion. I'm feeling stressed, let me eat. I'm feeling bored, let me eat. I'm feeling happy, let me eat. I want to celebrate, let me eat. I love you, let me show you my love by feeding you. I'm angry with you. You won't have any dinner. You won't have a dessert. Like, how fascinating is that? Food is used to manipulate ourselves and others. And when people go from eating heavier foods to lighter to no food at all, their bodies heal. I mean, surely if that's so true, we'd hear more about it. Would you? Think about it. Who benefits from all of us eating and eating more and more and more and more and more? Who makes money from us eating? Who makes money from us eating lots more? Who makes money from us having certain chemicals in food that play with our brain, with our hormones, and that have us craving more? It comes down to money. Most of us no longer farm our own food or grow our own food. Industries have grown, huge industries. I've got no idea of the numbers, but I think it'd be fair to say it's billions of pounds, dollars, whatever your currency is, spent on food each year. And so there's a vested interest. Conversely, if you can actually heal your body through changing what you eat or don't eat, well, then a lot of the mainstream medical approach wouldn't necessarily be needed either. Hmm. Now, some people might say, well, medical's there to support us. Hey, if I fall on a, I don't know, if I break my leg, if I get caught up in a car accident, if I'm in a burning building and I'm like needing surgery, hallelujah, get me to the hospital. If, on the other hand, I have to rely on an external system to take care of my health, I'm like, which is actually relatively modern. I mean, we've got herbal remedies from hundreds of thousands of years. And ironically, pharmaceuticals, of course, invariably take a natural herb and then trying to make it into a chemical compound and patent it, right? But if you look at the side effects of taking pharmaceuticals, and I'm not making them wrong, this is not about this, I'm just creating new awarenesses. They've also got a list of side effects. And actually, the law was changed in the US because of litigation and lawsuits and all that kind of thing that people could no longer sue. We've got stuff happening in the UK, which will feed into that with the whole that's being offered to people for this certain illness that's currently on the planet. And people are going to be offered, I'm saying that because if you say the word, it kind of gets censored now. Um, but there's all this stuff being set up by the government, which I alluded to in a video I shot yesterday, actually. On this channel, by the way, hashtag no filters, there are playlists. And there's a playlist entitled Quickies. And in that, I put a little video yesterday entitled Take It or Don't, What Works for You? And it was talking about this thing that's being offered to us all. And that might enlighten you. There's some cool information in there, actually. So you can make a more informed choice. But yeah, I mean, the side effects of taking things are listed. And how often do we know that somebody takes one kind of pharmaceutical to deal with some symptoms, something's happening in the body, then they have to take another one to deal with the symptoms or the side effects of the first drug, and then a third drug for the second, but they never get any healthier. In fact, they tend to deteriorate. Again, maybe controversial, but look around you. And not to say that things can't be useful as stepping stones. I'm not going to bash any industry. I'm just bringing light onto things and getting us to explore where there might be some different avenues we can take. I don't mind if you eat, if you don't eat, if you take medicines, if you don't take medicines, knock yourselves out. Do what's fun for you. I'm just somebody who's been always curious about the concept of being free, as in not being beholden to things and having as much ease in the world as possible. I've gone through different stages of that journey, obviously. And the food one, I hadn't even really thought about particularly, other than I eat healthily because I was into sport and stuff. And then going, well, you know, actually, what's happening with my body? I've got a bit of cellulite. Why is that there? Even though I'm fit and healthy. And oh, I'm suddenly in my early 40s. That means I should be. And I'm like, nah, this doesn't work. So that's why I began diving into this journey. And then I discovered, oh my God, there's stuff in my body that I don't even know is in my body. But when I don't eat and I put some stuff in that kind of helps it clean it out somehow, this stuff comes out of me. Where was that? That's nuts. Even on the raw side, I was eating loads of fruit and veg and fresh nuts and having some oils, avocados, and I was packing in the food, and I was still dumping out stuff faster than I was putting in. So I lost weight. I got trim. I got cut. Even more, all my endometriosis, which you ladies may be aware of. They talk about endometriosis being about the womb, the lining of the womb getting outside the womb and attaching to different body parts. And for a lot of women, heavy menstruation, lots of pain, issues with fertility. That had been cleaning up for me anyway. It was getting lighter and lighter because part of my exploration has been a lot around energy work and types of psychology and spirituality, and so many things. I was opening up as a person and getting more relaxed in who I was. That kind of tightness in my world was loosening, so my body was changing anyway. But I still had some heavy bleeds. When I explored that whole raw thing, that all went. As soon as I put meat or fish or dairy back in, I started eating dairy. I'd started eating dairy because the partner I was with was more of a meat and dairy person. So I'd started tapping that into my body. As soon as I put that stuff in, the endo stuff kicked in again. All those cramps, the clotting of blood, the smell, it all kicked in again. The sore breasts, they'd been a bit kind of grumpy the day beforehand. And all that went every time I took it out. Here's one thing I'm going to add, right, before we log off, because we're getting towards the top of the hour. We've got sort of 5-6 minutes. There's a fascinating case study of a woman who I'm pretty sure she grew up vegetarian, or she went vegetarian in her teens. And again, I'd have to look at these case studies because I haven't looked at these for years. I'm just going from memory. Yes, I'm pretty sure she grew up vegetarian. And then I think she went towards sort of the vegan, which means no dairy, as I'm sure you all know now. And she started even looking at raw and juicing. And so she was, she never basically had a menstruation, which people say is dangerous and you're meant to. She had 5 children, healthy children. 5. but she never bled. What's that about? There's a difference between ovulating, as in releasing the egg, and menstruating, bleeding, so-called shedding the lining. What's interesting here is that in the wild, animals gently spot, so a little bit of light bleeding. Because if you think about it, why build up a womb lining ready for an egg to be fertilized, taking all your lovely nutrients from your own body to create this beautiful space for a being to grow, and then dump that out of your body every month? Like, that's super inefficient. That makes no sense. It'd be like decorating your house and then trashing it every month, redecorating it, trashing it every month. So they only lightly spot like a little bit of that. But animals in captivity, domesticated pets, invariably bleed quite heavily unless they're neutered, spayed. And what makes you think we're any different? Like, I could totally turn on my bleeds and make them heavy again. In fact, bleeds can become so, like, mine's so light, ridiculous. I don't even notice it anymore. And there's times I don't have noticed anything at all. There's some other things that make it easier as well, by the way, ladies and gents, because you live with women and you have the knock-on effect when women are having issues in their body. A moon cup, which is a silicone, basically looks like an egg cup with a little stalk. One of the greatest things I ever did when I was still having my bleed was to use a moon cup, which for some people, they're like, oh my God, I've got to put this thing inside me. The clotting that I was having went away, the pain I was having reduced greatly. That was a massive contribution to my bleed whilst I was still having them, right, and on a mainstream diet. As Andy's saying, interesting, I agree that it's probably detoxing. So I'm going to guess that might be around the menstruation part. It might not be, but please correct me, Andy, if that's something else. Yeah, I mean, so I can totally categorically swear that when I was eating heavier food, I would bleed heavily. The blood would be darker. I'd have the soreness in the breast. As soon as I went light to the raw or the juice, or even to the level that I'm playing at now, that's all gone. Now, I haven't tested it out to the degree of, am I more fertile? There are many women who've gone down the raw route, who have become really highly fertile, having been told they were infertile, and have conceived. And again, it's not about that being better than an eating mainstream diet. It's not about that. It's just giving some information and some ideas that might give you, a bit more freedom. As Andy's saying, I don't have a womb. No, you don't. Don't think you're in the right group. Thanks, Ed. I can share that with my daughter. You're so welcome. So welcome. Andy, it's even beyond that. If you go back to listen to the beginning of this video, which you may have heard, is that actually illness, symptoms, disease, and I'm putting quotes because certain industries get very upset at the idea that you might be able to heal your body. There are a whole group of things you can clear out of your body that you're told are impossible to heal by changing what we eat. The lighter the food, definitely on the fruit end, and even on the true fasting end, there are phenomenal things about healing. There's a whole heap I could share here, guys, but right now that's probably as much as I can get to. Please re-listen to this. I think you'll find some interesting insights in here. Don't take it as the gospel. I'm sharing my experiences of others. There's food for thought about who benefits from us eating lots. There's a lot around us eating for our emotions. Personally, for example, I do a lot of energetic work, which basically means there's a lot of stuff that's going on the planet that I feel and kind of process through my body, which you might think is cray-cray. That's okay. There's days I eat to kind of just handle the amount of intensity from my body. Because when I eat, it numbs me out. It reduces the intensity of feeling all that. Other times I totally don't, and I just feel it, right? And it passes through and it's gone. With the intensity of what's going on in the world, I'm going to invite you to eating more lightly. I'm noticing when you go to eat emotionally, because those emotions are coming up to be released. And the world is going to get more intense. So being able to release what's been stuffed down in our bodies every time we eat, you might find it an easier ride. Again, take what you want from this. Don't. I'm totally cool. Thanks so much for joining with hashtag no filters. I need to slow down my speech sometimes. I get so excited. Well, thank you for joining me on hashtag no filters. See you again, guys, soon. Please share, subscribe. Take care. Big love.